Yes, yes, yes. Welcome back, team, to another episode of the High Performance Coach podcast. Today, I am joined by an incredible human who I've had the pleasure of knowing for the last 16 months or so. This individual has been through the High Performance Coach and has now stepped into an integral part of what it is that we now do and the impact they've been able to have and the skills that they possess. I believe are truly unique and the way in which they do things are incredibly aligned. And I believe you are going to take an abundance of value from today that's going to help you with the connections, the conversations that you now have and you now create, which will then be the lifeblood of your business growth, your ascension, and ultimately your capacity to be able to impact, transform, and change lives. So, Alex Brown, how are you? Welcome to the High Performance Coach podcast.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely no pressure whatsoever, but no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Help the listeners understand who is Alex and what's helped her get to the point that she's at today. What do you think has made you?
So I've always had an interest in health and fitness industry from literally football's also been a huge background of mine as well. So that literally started from obviously when I was a child. Literally remember obviously the first like football match I watched, etc., etc. So there's always been that sport kind of element there, health and fitness element there. And so that I kind of went through college. I actually went over to America to coach football over there for a few months as well, kind of came back. And that's when I kind of got the feel for business, so to speak. I wanted to go into this kind of coaching, sports coaching role. And this was a fair few years back as well, where social media was kind of a thing, but not really. You were posting on like forums and stuff like that. But the idea to create posts and reach more people was like super fascinating to me. So I kind of built this kind of coaching side, and then I also wanted to kind of branch out into PT. So that's where I started working at my local Pure Gym, which I was there for 3, 4, 5 years, I think, in the end. Again, I kind of got to the point where I was a bit like stuck to a degree. I'd done it. I really enjoyed teaching the classes, really enjoyed the spin and the body pump and all the 90s cheese music and all of that. And I really, really enjoyed it. But it got to the point I was like, I could literally just be on the gym floor. But it was that connecting with people and teaching the classes and chatting to people that I really kind of got a love for. And I was a bit like, actually, we could kind of do this more in a more of an outside setting, more of a kind of hybrid role. So kind of took that to do kind of group sessions with an online element as well, because then I also got to kind of use the social media side of things, because I then didn't have a gym floor that I could almost pick from, for want of a better word. I actually needed to go and put myself out there on the internet, which is something I massively enjoyed. As I say, it was the creative side. I'd sit there and write emails and content and all of this. And obviously that went through, and I still did the coaching and I still did the PT side of things. And I was actually looking for something else. Again, it was that creative side, and it actually came about where I got a role with somebody doing their outreach and their DMs. So it was their business, and they kind of wanted to bring somebody in, and they were working with different coaches, chats, DMs, and I absolutely loved it, which I get puts me in the minority because I know a lot of people absolutely hate it, but massively enjoyed it. And yeah, I kind of was in the trenches, so to speak, which I believe is the best way to learn. I was on different people's accounts, talking to different audiences. And ultimately, it got to the point where I was like, actually, I really enjoy this. So I started creating content that moved away from the training and the PT side of things and actually helped people with their social media, their connections. And yeah, that's ultimately kind of led us to where we are today, which is ultimately what I do now for myself in terms of helping coaches connect with their audience through their DMs, through outreach, and helping them with that sales process to ultimately get more clients into their business. So yeah, that's kind of where we are now.
You spoke about the love for the creative side. Where do you think that creative side comes from?
I don't know. It's a bit of a weird one. I think it's I feel like I have a little bit of a little bit of a skill in kind of seeing where someone's at and being able to put myself into their shoes. So I feel like creating content off the back of that I know is going to land with people, whether that means engagement or not, but I know that it's going to be like they're going to be like, shit, that's actually talking about me. So that creativeness to kind of understand people, understand the psychology around it, understand people's buying behaviors and why it is they do what they do. And that I feel that's where it started, just by being curious. I think, if anything, interested in why people make the decisions they do, and actually how we can use words through content or conversations in order to kind of give them value but help them in the same way and understand them in a certain way as well.
And having spent a period of time, obviously, in a lot of fitness professionals' accounts, what have you seen?
Good question. There is ultimately, for me, the biggest thing is we know as business owners that a lot of people are jumping into other people's DMs. So from being in fitness professionals' accounts, I can see the way that other people jump into their accounts as well. The likes of the people that are going to make you go viral on YouTube, the setters, the videographers, the people that can get you clients in 17 minutes and all of that. And I've seen that actually the way people do DMs can be very, very direct, very, very transactional. So actually it's a good way to kind of see it that way, because I've learned how other people are doing it, and then getting to a point where we're not going to do it like that, because that's shit. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on here, but yeah, that's not great. And that's not a way we want to do business with people. So that's ultimately what I've seen.
I love that. Business and relationships, and you've got to be able to speak to people. I think this is the thing. There's almost like this thing of like, you almost have like a couple of like two camps where it's like, you need to send 40,000 million messages a day in order for you to now be able to grow your business. If not, then you're going to basically fail. Or it's, we help you get business without having to send a single message. And it's like, well, no, business is relationships. You have to speak to people in order for you to now be able to build a connection. That's the key piece that you've got to be able to look at. And I think, again, it's not what you do, it's how you do it that's the most integral piece, in alignment with you and how you now want to be able to do things. And of course, the business that you now want to be able to build and create. So what would you say are some of the approaches that work incredibly well within some of the coaches' accounts that you work with that have great success? What are some of the things that they're doing that others maybe aren't?
So there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. I think ultimately the power of the conversation, a lot of that will come down to the content that's been put out previous to that. So it's ultimately like, we can't kind of go into DMs and just try and start conversations with people if the content hasn't done a lot of the nurture process beforehand. So with the success in terms of that, it's the work that's done before as well, right? So, it's something where you kind of just get somebody in to do your DMs and almost like, okay, cool, I don't need to do anything anymore. But actually the power is in the stories that you put out, the content that you put out, making sure that actually, I say making sure, obviously it is a little bit of a process, but also what works really well is making sure you have the right eyes. So when I say right eyes, it's ultimately the quality of the audience that you have. If you're creating content and you've got the wrong eyes looking at it, again, the conversations aren't going to have anywhere near the success that they could have. So it could be something that, if you're struggling at the moment and you're sending out the DMs because everyone's told you to send messages and you're not really seeing any return, you almost need to take it back a couple of steps and be like, cool, looking at my content and looking at my audience and be like, actually, do those two match up? And it's okay if they don't. You just kind of need to get aligned in terms of actually who it is that you want to help. You can then put strategies in place to go and find more of those people in terms of obviously, analyzing the audience, engagement, looking for the right pages where these guys hang out, whatever platform that might be on as well. So I think that's the one thing we need to think about, is ultimately taking it a couple of steps back to look at that first. In terms of obviously success actually in the conversations, is ultimately just being a human and being a person, right? Because I think sometimes we can look at outreach as just transactional, and it's, okay, this person's in my audience, so they must want what I have, so I'm just going to go in and sell my shit, which ultimately is going to put people off. And I think we need to flip it around sometimes and also be like, actually, is that how I would want to be sold to? Probably not. Do you know what I mean? I'd love for someone to literally come in and ask me how I am and what I'm up to, and actually listen and have an interest in me before that. And that is the groundwork. That's the foundations that then ultimately is going to lead to the rest of the success in the DMs. You could be laying those foundations for a day or 6 weeks. Everyone is going to be different. And this is why, we'll probably come on to it anyway, but this is why I have a little bit of a thing against scripts. Because ultimately, if you go out and send 15 messages, you're going to get 15 different responses back. Shit, what do I do? Like, my script doesn't say how to reply to this. So it's almost taking it a step back and replying to them as if they were sat in front of you, as opposed to the business person that ultimately has been told to send more DMs and get more people on calls. So it's that person piece that is missing, I think, for a lot of people.
Just do more DMs and send more messages. It's just like telling a client just to go and do more cardio.
Yeah.
Or eat less food.
Yeah.
it has absolutely no context. And
Hmm.
I think a great frame, and I shared this the other day, is like when you're sending a message, think, is this something that I would respond to? Is this
Hmm.
something I'd be even open to considering responding to? What's the relationship that I have with this person right now? And where am I on that journey with that? So, what type of communication style do I now need to bring in order for me to be able to start to nurture that process? And I think if you can go in with that mentality, it does allow you just to question the way in which you would now communicate and also do things. So when
Hmm.
you're looking at, obviously, like I think a lot of people say, like, I don't know where to start.
Hmm.
Where would you start?
So in terms of actually reaching out to people, your absolute warmest audience is your story viewers. Like hands down 100%. Not only are they watching your content, but they are wanting to see behind the scenes and they're wanting to see what you're up to day to day. So that's 100% the best place we want to start when it just comes to sending messages. Of course, you could start with your new followers, etc. But like you've just said, they're at unless they've come from a referral or come from a friend, they don't know anything about you. You might have just popped up on a reel. So they're following you because they're interested, but not all of our attention wants to be placed on those guys because from a dial perspective, they're kind of, or a ladder perspective, I should say, they're kind of at the bottom in terms of where they've come into a journey. They've not really seen much of your content. Story viewers, those are the guys that are actually keen to, as I say, what's your day to day. Granted, a lot of them are going to be clients, family, friends, etc. People you maybe wouldn't message, but there will be people in there. And the thing about story viewers is it changes every single day. We know that our numbers go up and down all of the time. We'll go onto some clients' accounts and we'll look at it, and there was someone who's viewed their story who we've not spoke to since like 2019. It's like, where has this person come from? But obviously something's happened for them to come back to your content. So in terms of messaging people and reaching out, that's the kind of best place to start. Then ultimately you would look at your content engagers as well, because these guys are seeing your content when a lot of your followers won't see it anyway. So if they're seeing it plus it's resonated with them in some way in order for them to engage, they're people that are going to be pretty high up in the ladder in terms of interested in what it is that you do.
What are some of the biggest kind of like misconceptions that coaches have around messages based upon maybe expectations that they have?
I think it's one of those. I think it's automatically if somebody responds, that means they're gonna become a client, which is not always the case. I get it sometimes when you've sent a message, somebody responds, and suddenly it's that excitement that someone's responded, which is great. Do you know what I mean? You can have that personal connection in the DMs, but then it's almost then like a rush to try and get them through the process and onto a call because you don't want to fuck it up or you don't want them to leave or anything like that, right? So I think that's the thing as well is noticing that actually anyone who lands in your DMs, whether you've outreached them or they've inbounded you, that's your opportunity to have a conversation with them. Whether that conversation turns into a call and a client that week or 6 months down the line, it gives you the opportunity to build that relationship with them. Ultimately, the relationship you build with someone in the DMs, whether it's on Zoom, is personal, right? And you can build that relationship a lot quicker than just throwing out more content and hoping that they see it. So yeah, that's what I would say is one of the big misconceptions is just assuming that, well, that person's landed, so I now need to get them onto a call. See it as an opportunity and see ultimately where it can lead from there.
I think as well, the big thing is like, oh, I've done X and I haven't basically, nobody's responded or nobody's booked in or whatever. So what's the point? And I think the big thing to look through is like appreciating and understanding. Again, relationships take time. They're at a different part of their buyer's journey right now. They might have no awareness over who you are. They might have a lot of awareness who you are. And they actually now might be at a point of, commitment where they're ready to now be able to put their hand in the air. The biggest thing I think we have to consider is just recognizing that the work that you do today is going to be reaped the rewards of, I believe, in 3, 6, 12, 24, 36 months time. Not, all right, I've done this and I haven't seen a return, so what's the point? Just like I've gone and done a training session and I don't look like a bodybuilder yet. So what's the point? And I think there's almost like this gap because the connection to conversations and the relationships take time. Like any relationship you have in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and also the big thing that you're not trying to do is then basically go, right, okay, how do I get this person to now just buy from me? Because if that's the intention that you go in with straight away, your intentions are now going to be slightly off and how you're going to be communicating is going to be slightly misaligned. Instead of
Yeah.
going back to what you just said at the very beginning, which is that appropriate curiosity. and just
Hmm.
going in with that curiosity of actually, how can I help this person? How can I impact this person? How can I add value to this person's world? And allow them to actually experience a different way because
Yeah.
they are being messaged every single day and bombarded by lots of stuff. Therefore, you've got to be better in how
Hmm.
you approach things and realize that, yeah, it's going to be a process you're going to have to take people through. And just because you've now messaged 5 people, 10 people does not now instantly mean that A, your business is a failure because nobody's responded, or like B, nobody's listening. So what's the point? So I'm not going to do it anyway. Or C, like, yeah, like it's not a method that works for me, so I don't want to do it anymore. So I'm going to go and try and find the next thing, you know?
Yeah. I think as well is we don't know that timeline's invisible, right? We don't know what that timeline is, and we don't know how this person buys. You're going to get hyper buyers. You're always going to get hyper buyers. You're going to get someone who sees one before and after picture and they're like, shit, I want a bit of that. Do you know what I mean? And then it's up to you in terms of making that call. But we don't know that. And you need to go into the process of the nurture journey as well. And I think it comes back to you should never go into your DMs when you need leads because you're then going to come across as pushy, salesy, which is all the things we have in the back of our mind that we feel like we're being, but you're then just trying to rush the process. And then when you're trying to rush it, you don't come across in a way that's actually listening to what the other person said, understanding what they're doing, resonating with them, relating with them, and actually delivering it in your personality. You're doing it from a place of fear, scarcity. Oh my God, I need people in. So, it's getting to the point where actually can we set this up as almost like, a daily task, for me, outreach, and I know people don't like it, but it's a huge part of your marketing in my eyes. Do you know what I mean? It has to be there in some way. How that's scheduled into your day is 100% up to you. But as I say, for me, I find a lot of people, they'll do it until they've got, oh, I bought 5 clients in, and then it stops. And then we repeat the same cycle 3 months down the line when actually we need people again. So it's getting to a position where we can actually just have it ticking along in the background. And then ultimately we can turn the dial up and down as and when we need it.
If I think about when I was on the gym floor, the reason I got clients from the gym floor was because I spent all of my time on the gym floor speaking to people, having conversations with people, finding out about them, helping them, providing some value. And that was literally it. That was even before I actually had the space to actually be able to coach them on a one-to-one level. So then when I actually opened, obviously J Physique at the time, and then also some coaching, it was like there was all of these people because the relationships that I built, the value that I'd added, and the connections that I created.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'd gone into that gym and I just put my hood up and had just trained and never had a conversation with anybody, there would not be those relationships that you will have now like developed over that period of time to the point of trust. Now, when you're in the online space, taking somebody from content to buy my stuff is quite a big gap.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to be able to look at, right, okay, well, what's the process that I'm now wanting to facilitate that's now going to create the safety, the belonging, the clarity, the awareness that they now need in order for them to be able to be one step closer to making a decision if they are now in a position where they are now looking for somebody to work with.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's where obviously the connections and having those relationships that are built not when you need leads or need sales, but you can just now continue to build your orchard
Yeah.
and obviously now continue to like create those more opportunities. The more opportunities, the more relationships, and then the more times that you walk down the orchard, the potential more apples you'll pick from the tree as and when they are ready. But that can't be forced because if it is, nobody likes being forced into doing things or feeling like they're being sold to.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's looking at that initial conversation you have with somebody. I know we touched on it earlier on today, is like that can have a ripple effect across their close community, and like we would have had it in clients' accounts where we've actually had a conversation with them, for them, they were working with a coach or they were doing whatever. So we kind of offered them some value and left them. And then 6 months later, you'll get a message back to say, oh, really keen, I've just seen you've done this, like really keen to get involved. But as much as we don't have it in black and white that nurture process works, we kind of know that actually, yeah, we had that conversation with them. We gave them something of value, and actually now we are in their mind. So when the time is right, because we did XYZ in the beginning, that is now paid off later down the line. So I think it's actually looking at your conversations you're having now and being like, if this doesn't go anywhere now, this can have a ripple effect, whether it's with that person or actually they're at dinner with their friends or they're at their, training session and actually they've had a conversation. Suddenly that might bring one follower to your page. It's a new conversation you can have. And I think it's difficult because a lot of what we do is it can be based off of emotion, and actually it doesn't feel great when you go into go and do your DMs and people aren't responding, or someone says they don't need anything right now, or they're happy with it, whatever it might be. But it's looking at it as an opportunity to be like, cool, actually I've helped that person in some way, and it doesn't have to be through my program. Now ultimately I know that can have a knock-on effect without me even being there, with the people that they talk to, the people they might bring to their page, the content they now see. If you've had a really good conversation with them as well, like they're going to be thinking about that as well. I think it's a huge thing when it comes to the conversations, especially when you get into the goal setting and the struggles, etc. We need to be asking them questions they've maybe not been asked before, and that's they're going to think about that. And ultimately, if you're then going to be the coach that your shit, because you've asked them the questions that you need the answers for in terms of your program, and for them they're going to be thinking about it, and then you look like, well, you are the coach that's not just a PDF workout plan, £49. You are now a coach that actually has a program, and that's going to be on their mind.
One thing that I heard from somebody that communicated with me on a call earlier was just the power of compounding connections, exactly what you alluded to. Is that okay? Just that impact of the way in which you've conducted yourself, communicated with said person, might lead to an indirect connection that you're now then going to be able to create as a byproduct, obviously, of that. And that also comes back down to the energy, the intentions you turn up with. When it comes down to the real, like, tactical, it's like, okay, Alex, what should I message? What should I say? Like, how do I now say it? Where would you start, and what would be a couple of frameworks that you could now give, or you would present, or you've seen that have worked quite well to be able to start to develop those conversations? I think that first hurdle is usually the biggest challenge for people to get over.
100%. And I think it comes back to as well, just kind of, we don't want to be pushy, we don't want to be salesy, we don't want to go in. And I think the biggest thing we need to look at when it comes to kind of the messaging is it coming across like you as well. So obviously we can kind of have a template. So when it comes to like the story viewers, the content engagers, just simply opening it up with, really appreciate you following along my stories, really appreciate you liking that bit of content on Sally's transformation, etc., because you're thanking them, you're appreciating their support, right? Then ultimately off the back of that, we can then go in with some type of question. Now, what works really well for this is the more personal it is, the more likely you are to get a response. Okay. Now, not everybody we can be personal with. We're noticing now a lot of people have got more private Instagram accounts, so ultimately opening up their audience, there's not a whole lot we can go off anyway. But going onto their page and making it look like you've taken the time to have a look, something they've done, something they've, a holiday they've been on, event they did, maybe they did a marathon at the weekend, whatever it is. But asking them about it just shows you've gone one level deeper. Right. And actually you've gone back through. Another thing you can do as well is ultimately go back through if you've had a conversation with them before. So it's a really good way to kind of scroll back through. Again, sorry, it just shows the energy and intention in that message. And we're not just going out and saying, hey, how are you, to 50 people just because your mentor told you to, or because you think it's the right thing to do. So the more personal we make the message, the better. Story views are actually a really good subtle way to start a conversation. So if you're going through, say, let's go through your story viewers, look at who's got a story up, and you can ask them a question off the back of that. Again, make it intentional. Don't make it a question that you genuinely wouldn't ask, because you're just going to come across as someone who's just asked it for the sake of it. So genuine conversation starter. And as I say, take your time with it. Do it with purpose. You are much better off, which sounds super cliche, but you're much better off sending 5 to 10 messages where you've taken a little bit of time than 25 messages that you've literally just sent out. I think as well, though, what we need to think about is the personalization in the messages comes through the conversation. There isn't anything wrong with jumping in and asking someone how their weekend was on a Monday, because actually that's being a human at the end of the day, right? Because we find a lot of people almost think that that's too simple and that's too generic, for want of a better phrase, but actually we're going in and we're just asking how somebody is, right? They're in your audience, they know of you, which is another barrier I think people struggle to overcome, because it's like, I don't want to be salesy or pushy, but It's remembering that these people have chosen to follow you. These people have chosen to watch your stories every single day. They have chosen to like your content. All right, something's resonated with them. We're not cold DMing anyone. So we should never need to cold DM anyone. But it's up to them if they choose to respond back. But in terms of actually going in, thanking them for what they've done, use your language as well. So I'll be like, hey, mate, how's it going? Because that's the way I speak, right? And they would have got that from my content and my stories. There has to be that bridge of authenticity there as well. So it doesn't, again, just look like you've just kind of copy and pasted it to everybody. But again, on the flip side of that, just asking somebody how there is, if there's no personalization to go off of, absolutely nothing wrong with that. You'll be surprised on the response rate off the back of that. Yeah, I think that's one of the best ways to do it. And I think as well, testing it with your audience. So we work on one account at the moment, and literally we can go in straight off the bat and ask them, what goals are you working towards right now? Because he's got that authority in his audience that we get a response rate 80% plus of the time. Whereas for many, it would be too direct. So actually going in and actually testing different things, what works well with your audience, gathers a little bit of data per se, so you can actually see what is working well and almost just double down on that.
What if somebody comes back to you and says, but Alex, I'm not getting anybody that's really engaging, interacting, watching my stuff. I've got my nan, my mum, one of my best friends from school and a few other people, but nobody. Where would you then go, and what would the approach then be if you're now looking at exploring new audiences where your people or their people, sorry, are going to potentially be hanging out?
Yeah, so I think what we need to look at is ultimately who it is that you want more of in your audience is the most important thing. So it's like what we said at the beginning in terms of that right audience, the quality audience. So who is it that you want to work with? So, simple example, if you want to work with amateur rugby players, for example, right? So actually, I don't really have any of those in my audience. I'm posting content that's going to resonate with them, but I'm just not getting the right eyes look at it. So what we do is we can actually go out and look for the pages where these guys are, right? And the thing what you want to do is you want to start local, okay? Because there's not, you don't really want to go out and just search for any random rugby pages because you're going to be going through hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of followers, trying to find people. So if we can start a focal point, local to you is actually a really good place to start. Because especially if you've been posting on things, again, the ripple effect we spoke about before, your name might have cropped up in certain conversations anyway. So we can go and find, say, 1 to 3 of these rugby pages, local rugby clubs. Then what we can do is ultimately look at the activity of their page. What we don't want to do is go to a page that's not posted for 3 years. Go to one that's, posting relatively active. So they could have pasted on last Sunday for a match, last Friday or whatever. And then from there, go to the people that have engaged in that content. So rather than going through their followers, which could be 5,000 people and you're just scrolling, go to the people that have engaged in the content because that's going to be active people. Have a little bit of a look through and engage with them. Okay, so it's a lot of engagement, but ultimately your name is now going to show up on someone who's outside of your current audience, but could be a very good ideal fit for your business. Suddenly they're aware of you. So it's not a case of actually I'm doing it for a follow back. It's now this person's aware of me, right? And if we're doing that with multiple people, especially if we're looking in the right place, as opposed to just a random gym, like anywhere. But if we're looking in the right place, we're going to find more of the people that actually we want to bring in. We're then engaged with them. Our name's going to show up on their wall. They're now aware of us. And ultimately, it's that opportunity for them to come back to our page.
I love that. Let's shift gears. So if you've now got somebody who's a coach who's now got to a certain point where they're looking to delegate and outsource, obviously, their chats and their appointment setting, because they're now in a position where they've got to be able to start to relinquish control in certain areas to be able to work on other aspects of the business. They're looking at what's the best approach, what's the best strategy, how would I now best support training somebody to now be able to do that? What would be some key things that you would maybe be able to present that you've seen has worked incredibly well?
So I think the first thing we need to look at is ultimately that you have a method or strategy in place that you've used yourself. I think sometimes almost going backwards with that, I think sometimes we can hire people in too quick just because we don't enjoy doing it ourselves, but then you're bringing somebody in when you've got no method or strategy that works. So then we're almost in kind of a lose-lose situation with it. So ultimately you need something that works that you've done yourself. So the conversations, maybe the engagement, maybe the looking at the story work. Sorry, I thought I frozen. How you work, obviously, with that in terms of bringing people in. And then I'd set some realistic KPIs for that person based off of the work that you've already done. So if you know that you can send X amount of messages in half an hour with the training, granted, it's not going to be there depending on their experience where it is right now, but just so everyone's on the same page in terms of what we're aiming at. You then have some sort of loose sales process in terms of this is where the chit chat is, and then actually what questions do we ask and how do we get people that would be onto a call? Again, something that you've tried and tested before that you can almost plug and play for them to follow at the same time.
What I'm hearing is you need to have a system and a process that you can then basically put onto paper, that you can then basically provide somebody with the platform to be able to then go through and then be able to obviously have autonomy to be able to develop that in a way that feels right for them, which comes back to the majority. And this was even me when I even first brought Troy into the company. It was like all of my systems and all of my processes and everything that I now did were in my head. So then the challenge that I had was like, well, how do you do this? He was like, well, you do it like blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, well, yeah, where is that? I'm like, it's in my head, you know? And it's like, the biggest thing is like how you can now, as a business owner, even from this, from very early doors, start to build like just documentation and a record of this is what I do and this is how I do it. This is the framework. This is my kind of methodology. And this is the approach that I now take. That then basically means you're building a system, which then means you can pass it off to somebody else. And then with obviously the development of you then being able to support them and obviously give them the right CPD is something they can then obviously latch onto, which is what I'm hearing in terms of if you're at a point where you're looking to delegate and outsource the conversations you're now having and being so integral. How important is your content in being such an indicator of how good the conversion of those conversations or the connections of those conversations can be?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things, because ultimately, you know, if we look at content, it's almost like the blanket, right? So you're helping lots of people from a blanket perspective with content, and obviously the conversation is the one-to-one. But you want people to not just engage, but you want them to read the content, you want them to digest the content. And the only way that's going to happen is if they feel like it is resonating to them in some way. And that's not just as well from a business perspective, talking about kind of stories, lessons, experiences that you feel might resonate with your audience now as well. You know, you kind of say it all the time, and it's like, actually, that person needs to read it and think that person's talking about me. Because actually, then when it comes to the conversation, they're going to feel like they already know you. They know actually what you do, how it works, you know, who you've helped before. They know you as a person. They followed your stories for 6 months about how you walk your dog and you have, you know, go and watch the football or whatever. So they feel like they know you. So actually, the conversation then can be, not all the time, relatively easy. Not saying that actually they're going to then sign up, but the foundation is there for you to build it because they feel like they already know you. So you're actually having an easier conversation. They've got their barriers are down a little bit, because ultimately when it comes to, you know, when you're talking about the goals and the struggles, etc., and getting onto the health and fitness side of the conversation, it can be quite difficult for people to talk about, quite vulnerable. But if they feel like they know you because of your content, those barriers of, you know, they like I say, they feel like they know you. So those barriers come down. And actually, when you ask them about, you know, tell me a bit more about that, or, you know, why is it that you want to lose 2 stone? They're happy to tell you about it because they feel like you already get it. And that's your content, sorry, has done that job for you.
One thing that I shared at an event a little while ago, which I think really kind of aligns to what you've just communicated, is like you almost want to be getting to a point in your mind where you think, how can I now create content to the point that if I then met somebody, they'll be like, I feel like I already know you.
Yeah.
So then when you go to the gym or you go to the coffee shop or you go to the beautician or wherever, it's like, I feel like they already feel like they know you because they're talking about your dog or they're talking about the fact you're like, and again, that creates that sense of safety and connection. And that requires you then to be able to speak, I believe, just outwit just health and fitness and be able to talk about general life stuff, because they're the things that we now connect on. Not only that, actually being able to share your values, what's important to you, because that's going to gravitate and radiate the right types of people into your world, which then means obviously when you're having these connections and conversations, it's going to feel a lot easier as well. So I think your content's the key that unlocks the door. The connections are obviously the key that then obviously take people obviously on a kind of journey to develop and further nurture the relationships and the trust that you're trying to build. And then obviously the process that you then have from a sales side of things obviously allows them to be reassured and have kind of confirmation that they've been able to make a good decision.
Yeah, and I think as well, I think with coaching, it's quite an intimate relationship, right? Like we said about this, I was speaking to Ben about it the other day. Like ultimately you're going to work with somebody, and then majority of the time you're literally going to ask them to send you a picture in their underwear, like 2 days after speaking to them on a call. That's an intimate relationship, and they're going to feel like they need to know somebody in order to do that. You know, you're going to push them to new levels. You're going to push their boundaries. That, you know, you're going to challenge them. You're going to make them feel uncomfortable, because ultimately from a coaching experience, no matter kind of what niche you're in, that's what you're getting people to do. And they're only going to do that with someone they feel comfortable with. If they feel like you are just another coach that just talks about calories and stuff, not only are you really going to kind of struggle from a conversation point of view, but then ultimately kind of helping people when they're in the business. You know, there could be a little bit of friction, but if someone feels like they know you, they trust you, and they're open to not just kind of follow your advice and adhere to what it is that you're doing, but you're going to have a really nice relationship that ultimately could last quite a long time as well.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. What do you believe is working well in the industry just now when it comes to being able to get coaches more calls booked with prospects? What do you think are some of the ingredients that's working at this current time of the year?
So I think it's having content at the moment that really aligns to this time of year, and it's going one level deeper as opposed to just the summer shred. Do you know what I mean? It's actually talking about why this person wants to get in that shape for the summer. So from a content perspective, going one level deeper. I think offering some sort of lead magnet is working really well at the moment. Again, it's adherent to not just the time of year, but to the audience. It's huge, right? I think because you ultimately the lead magnet's going to open up the conversation. Something that's working really well with a couple of people as well is ultimately when we kind of market the lead magnet in their stories, we have a message that we send out, and then we have a PS at the bottom that's like, oh, we've just launched this, we've got a couple of spots open. Because ultimately anyone who puts their hand up for a lead magnet needs help some way. And then the amount of conversations and calls off the back of that has worked very, very well, because you've opened that door for somebody to be like, actually, yeah, I'd like to find out more. It's not, do you want a spot? It's, would you like more information? Then we can have a good back and forth with them. And as I say, because they've already put their hand up for the lead magnet, whatever it is, we know there's something that they need a little bit of help with. The fact that they're a story viewer as well, obviously they're a really warm part of your audience. So yeah, that kind of strategy has worked very, very well. And I think not just necessarily now, but I think all the time, just giving people the opportunity to do something in your stories. It doesn't need to be business related, especially if it's personal related, right? If you put any sort of personal poll, question box, something in your stories, the engagement usually goes through the roof, because it's not business related. You're not asking them if they prefer squats or lunges, you know, it's literally just personal. But it's a conversation starter. You can literally just go in and have a conversation with them. And I think doing more of that not only shows your audience you as a person, and you're not just someone who trains and works out and eats food out of Tupperware and is on Zoom all day, but you're actually somebody who does do other stuff. You know what I mean? And it doesn't need to be dramatic, but it's literally just, so you're going to pull people towards you that believe in the same thing. Like when it comes to, you know, silly stuff like Netflix shows and things like that, you know, people are going to have an opinion on it. So you sharing your opinion is going to pull people towards you. And it sounds silly, but that could be the difference for a lot of people.
And again, I mean, you can't have that in its sole entity. You've got to be able to have obviously a stack of proof. You've got to have obviously a product. You've got to have a program. You've got to have confidence in what you do. You've got to add value. This is just another piece of the puzzle that just now allows you to become more complete and give them the opportunity to build a greater level of connection and relatability with you, which I think, again, like is absolutely key. And the thing you have to think about is like, do you go onto social media to get health and fitness advice, or do you go onto social media to escape, get some entertainment, avoid what it is that you now know that you need to be doing? So when it's like, you know, what do you struggle with more? It's like, well, nobody's going to then basically just go, oh, this, or this. Like they basically now want to be able to go on to be either entertained, informed. Everybody has obviously their different things that they get from that. And that's why it's so important you understand your audience, and also recognizing that, you know, some people do prefer the far more direct approach But this is now where you've got to be able to consider, who is it I'm speaking to? What are their wants? What are their needs? What are their values? What are their beliefs? Have a level of awareness around like a profiling of that person, which is so important that you then understand, who do I help, which isn't going to necessarily be like, gender, age, what job they've got. That's going to be their psychographic in terms of the characteristics, their traits, their personality, their values, all of these pieces. Because when you can inherently understand that, you can communicate with them on a deeper level. And when you can articulate their problems better than they can explain it themselves, that takes you one step closer. So when you add the human bit on top, the Netflix shows, or Lola eating poo or whatever it's going to be,
Yeah.
that's then often the piece that is like, right, okay, that's the next bit of connection that can be the opportunity that lends its hand to people going, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, like you say, it is all down to it. And I think I'll be honest, it was one of those things when I first started getting into the online side. I must have watched 17 webinars on niche, and I'm like, oh my God, like not again. Do you know what I mean? It is that, but it is so important. And I think just that word, people are a bit like, oh my God, again, but that's everything. Like, you can't build, like, without getting off the topic of conversations, you can't build any part of your business unless you know who your niche is. How, that we can't build a program, we can't build a lead magnet, we can't build an audience, we can't build content, we can't have conversations if we don't know who we're speaking to. And I think it's such an integral part, because it is one of those, like we said before, in terms of, if you need to go out and find more people for your audience, there has to be who are we looking for? We could literally go literally anywhere. So there needs to be that kind of focal point. And I think it's always going to evolve as well. You know what I mean? It will get time where maybe you change niche or anything like that. But whenever you're kind of marketing, there does have to be that kind of linchpin that kind of pulls you back and be like, okay, that lane where it's like, okay, this is the person I'm aiming at, as opposed to 6-lane motorway where I'm just kind of swaying from one to the next.
Yeah, I think to simplify, like, niches, who are your people? I think
Yeah.
sometimes people get confused and overwhelmed. I just think, who are your people? Like,
Mm-hmm.
who are my people? Like,
Yeah.
literally, just if you can look at it like that, it completely removes a lot of the friction, a lot of the barriers, because you're like, well, who are my people? Well, again, they're going to be people that probably got similar values, interests, beliefs, that are obviously similar to yours. And
Yeah.
if you can now start to think about it like that, then it becomes easier for you to be able to create content, because you're then not thinking, who do I need to be? It's like, actually, what do I want to talk about?
Mm-hmm.
Final question, Alex. And this is something that I've asked every single person very recently. It's something I'm really curious about.
Okay.
What have you changed your mind on recently?
In it, like, from an outreach point of view, yeah.
Business life,
Oh,
whatever. What have you now looked at something through a different perspective and maybe gone, actually, do you know, that's what I thought I believed, or now actually I see that in a different way?
yeah, I tell you what, I will kind of use it from outreach, just because obviously it's something that I do quite a lot. But I always used to have a massive thing against generic messages. I was like, that is, you can't send generic messages. That's awful. Like, that's so bad. Nobody should ever do that. But actually, starting a conversation from obviously doing it and seeing the responses, and obviously the response rate that we get, actually just sending someone a message being like, hey, like, how's it going? Like, hope you had a great weekend. You look at that and say generic, right? And actually, you could probably, there's only so many ways you can ask people how they are. Sending it out to 10 people and getting 8 responses is actually a very good way to start a conversation, and works. I say it works now. 2 years down the line, it might not work anymore. Nobody wants to be asked how they are. But I think that's possibly something I've changed my mind on, especially when it comes to the conversations, because yeah, I was very much against it. But then in my head, I was then just trying to, like, how can I say, how are you, in like 10 different ways? Like, you know what I mean? And I'm just stuck in this cycle. It's like, just send it. But yeah, from doing it, that's something that I've changed my mind on recently, 100%.
Amazing. Alex, thank you so much. Final point, where can people find you?
So I'm literally on Instagram, Alex Brown, the connection builder. Yeah, all things outreach, chats,
Incredible.
conversations, sales.
I know the impact you're having. I know the value that you're bringing, and also the creativity and the curiosity that you lead with, that's allowing you to just build the connections for coaches in the right way, which is absolutely phenomenal. So thanks so much for your time, your energy, and wisdom. And I'm excited to do this again. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. See you later.